My family called me a cheap doormat, saying I'd keep paying their bills if they just faked love. I found out by accident on my sister's unlocked iPad in a secret group chat. I didn't cry, I smiled. What I did the next day made them all go silent. They called me a cheap doormat. My own family did. They swore I'd keep footing their bills forever, just as long as they faked a smile and called me sis. But one night, the truth ripped through that illusion like a knife. I wasn't supposed to see it. How could I have been? It was on my sister's iPad, left carelessly on the kitchen counter. A group chat. My name. Mockery. Manipulation. Receipts. So many receipts. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. Instead, the next day I invited them all to lunch. And let's just say, by dessert, they couldn't swallow a single word. The morning of Bethy's birthday, I woke before my alarm. Light filtered through the blinds, painting soft stripes across my walls. For a brief moment, the quiet almost felt kind. Cora, my landlord, was already up. Her arthritis made mornings a slow, careful dance, but she always insisted on folding her own laundry. Stubborn. In the way only someone who's seen too much can be. I brought her the chamomile tea she liked, 2 drops of honey, and laid her pills out next to a napkin with a little orange slice. It wasn't much, but she smiled like it meant the world. "Your family coming today?" she asked, her voice trying and failing to sound casual. I hesitated. "Bethy's birthday." She nodded slowly. "They treat you right yet?" I gave her the smile I reserved for loaded questions. "They remember me when bills are due. That counts for something." She chuckled, a low, raspy sound. "Well, let them remember you when you stop answering." I bent to pick up her old reading glasses from under the coffee table. "I'll bring a gift basket." "Nothing fancy, just things I know she likes." "You always bring more than what's asked," Cora noted. I shrugged. "I've learned not to show up empty-handed. Makes it harder for them to say I brought nothing to the table." By late morning, I'd packed 2 baskets. One with a bottle of wine, artisan crackers, her favorite hand cream. The second, full of homemade baked ziti and lemon bars I'd started at dawn. I placed them carefully in the back seat, next to Marshmallow, my rescue mutt. His eyes always seemed to understand too much. Before I left, I triple-checked the locks, watered the single basil plant on my kitchen windowsill, and tucked my paralegal files into a drawer. One of my freelance clients, a messy divorce case, had left me notes full of contradictions last night. I'd need a clear head later to untangle that web of lies. The drive to Bethy's place felt longer than usual. Maybe it was because I already knew how it would go: polite hugs, too loud laughter, side eyes. The kind of affection that evaporates the second the dishes are cleared. As I pulled into her driveway, pop music and clinking glasses spilled from the open back patio. I stood at the front door for a moment, balancing both baskets, wondering why I always felt like I was walking into a room that had already decided I didn't belong. I knocked. No answer. So, I let myself in. The kitchen smelled like takeout posing as gourmet. Wine bottles lined the counter, a half-eaten charcuterie board sat under a plastic cover. I called out a soft hello and placed the baskets neatly on the table. Bethany poked her head in, finally. "Oh, hey Arlena. You didn't have to bring anything." I gave a small smile. "Just a little something I threw together." She smirked. "You and your baskets. So wholesome." From the patio, someone laughed a little too loud. My brother-in-law, Derek. "Look who brought another casserole." Arlene's solution to everything: bake it or pay for it. The words stung, but I swallowed them, just like I'd been trained to do since childhood. I reached for a glass of water from the sink, steadying my breath. I'd learned long ago that arguing didn't change minds. It only confirmed their opinion of you being too sensitive. I sat at the edge of the kitchen island, barely noticed. Conversations around me blurred, high-pitched and pointless. Talk of spin classes, spa days, who was splitting which Airbnb for their fall trip. That's when I noticed Bethy's iPad. Unlocked. Screen still glowing. Left next to the cheese knife. I didn't mean to touch it, but my hand moved out of instinct. I used to help her with tech stuff, setting up passwords, syncing her calendar. My fingerprints still worked. The screen opened to the Messages app. A thread was already highlighted. The title made my breath catch, Doormat Club. Curiosity burned hotter than caution. I tapped. And there it was. Thread after thread. My mother, Bethany, our cousin Mia, and Derek. Screenshots of my Venmo payments. Messages I'd sent asking about overdue rent. Even photos of the grocery bags I dropped off when Mom couldn't get out in the heat. They'd turned me into a running joke. Asterisk, she thinks she's helping. Bless her. Asterisk, she's addicted to being needed. Asterisk, got a dentist bill? Cue tears. She'll cover it. Just send her a photo of Mom looking tired. Asterisk, she opens her wallet like it's reflex. And then, my mother's words. Unmistakably hers. Asterisk, she's not family. She's a wallet with a sad smile. Asterisk, I didn't gasp. I didn't cry. I simply placed the iPad back exactly as it was. Then I walked out the front door. No one stopped me. As I drove home, the streetlights flickered one by one as if bowing their heads. I turned off my phone halfway through the drive. I didn't want to risk a "Hey, where'd you go?" text, sent out of guilt, not care. I pulled into the driveway, let Marshmallow out, and sat on the stoop as the last glow of daylight disappeared. Inside, I poured a glass of water. No wine, no drama. Just silence. I opened the small jewelry box where I'd kept the glass bracelet my mother gave me when I was 8. It used to mean something. Used to remind me of bedtime songs and pancakes on Sundays. I took it out, placed it on the coffee table, and stared at it. Something inside me shifted. Not shattered, but settled. And for the first time in a long while, I smiled. Then I stood up, walked to my desk, and opened a folder on my laptop. One I'd named years ago, but never used, Family Records. The laptop screen glowed softly in the quiet of my apartment. The only sounds were the low hum of the fridge and the occasional creak from the radiator pipes. I didn't hesitate this time. Didn't second-guess myself or wonder if I was overreacting. My fingers moved on muscle memory. Click, click, click. The folder named Family Records opened like a box I'd buried long ago, and it finally decided to exhume. I started with the oldest files: Venmo transfers, bank statements, digital receipts. Most were small at first. $40 here for Mom's medication. $110 for Bethy's car repair. Then it snowballed. Rent for 3 months. A copay for a surprise root canal. Emergency flights to Florida because Mia had a panic attack and couldn't fly coach. Each entry had a note, a timestamp, and, ironically, my overly polite tone. Just let me know if you need anything else. No need to pay back. I'm happy to help. I paused and scrolled back up. Somewhere along the way, I had stopped expecting anything in return. I wasn't being generous. I was being groomed. By the time I got to last year's records, the total was over $117,000. I leaned back in my chair and let the number sit with me. $117,000. That wasn't just help. That was funding. That was being the unofficial bank of a family that laughed behind my back and called me a wallet with a sad smile. And I'd kept the receipts, like a fool who still hoped one day they'd say thank you. The screen blurred for a second as a dull ache built behind my eyes. I blinked it away. No tears tonight. I opened a new folder, Atlas. The name made my spine straighten. That was the side of me they didn't know. The part that hadn't just survived. She'd studied, prepared, planned. For the past 2 years, I'd been consulting remotely for a boutique law firm in New Hampshire. Not flashy work, but solid. Estate planning, financial protections, elder abuse. I'd taken on the quiet, complicated cases no one wanted because I understood what it felt like to be used in the name of love. I pulled up the draft of a legal trust I'd started last fall. Half finished and forgotten until now. It was designed to secure what little was left of my father's estate, his pension, shares, a rural land parcel, and a small vintage coin collection he'd meant to pass down to whoever keeps their integrity. At the time, I wasn't sure what that meant. Now I did. I adjusted the trust structure, removing my mother's name, then Bethy's, then Mia's. I added a charity clause instead. Quiet. Simple. The assets would go to a scholarship fund for kids aging out of foster care. Not a single cent would go to those who mocked the hand that held them up. I saved the file, encrypted the folder, and backed it up twice. Then I opened my banking app. I froze all joint credit lines I had with my mom, ones I'd signed years ago, just in case she needed help with medical bills. Autopay for her gas and electricity? Cancelled. The life insurance policy where she was still listed as my sole beneficiary? I filed the form for reassignment. There was no grand announcement, no dramatic phone call. Just quiet action, like slipping out of a room without letting the door slam. I got up to stretch and wandered to the kitchen. The soft glow of the microwave clock read 11:43 p.m. I opened the fridge, not because I was hungry, but out of habit. There, right next to the leftover soup container, was a stack of sticky notes I used for grocery lists. I pulled one off and grabbed a pen. If they only love you when you're useful, you're not loved. You're leased. Dad had said that one night after I'd just paid Bethy's mortgage for the third time. I'd laughed it off then, thought he was being bitter. Turns out, he was just telling the truth before I was ready to hear it. I stuck the note to the fridge door, just below a fading photo of us fishing by Lake Geneva. He had that crooked half-smile, the one he only wore when he was proud of me. "Thanks for waiting, Dad," I whispered. The room felt warmer somehow. Not in temperature, but in something deeper. I didn't feel lonely tonight. I felt intact. I turned off the lights except the one over the stove and carried my laptop back to the couch. As I sat, I saw a notification flash across the screen. "Bethany invited you to Sunday brunch, fam." The gall. I stared at it for a moment, fingers hovering over the keyboard. Then I clicked yes. And I smiled. The morning sun had already slipped past the blinds when I finished brushing the dog hair off my blazer. Deep forest green. Crisp lines. Not too flashy, not too soft. Just enough structure to remind myself and them that I was no longer the same version of Irina they'd leaned on like a human ATM. I double-checked my bag, slim folder tucked in, zipped tight. Then I slid my phone into the side pocket, smoothed the sleeves of my blazer, and headed out the door. The drive to Neepville was quiet, except for the steady rhythm of the turn signal at red lights. I parked just around the corner from the restaurant, giving myself a few moments to breathe before walking in. The brunch spot was quaint in that curated kind of way, framed vintage print ads on the wall, chipped white mugs that were meant to look charming. I spotted them right away at the corner booth: Sylvie, Raina, Mia, Raina's husband Greg, and their daughter Kennedy, now somehow already a teenager. They looked up as I approached. "Irina." Raina's voice stretched too wide, fake delight dripping like syrup. "You look rested. Guess it pays to have no kids or responsibilities." I pulled my chair back slowly. "Or maybe just to stop paying for someone else's," I said, sliding into the booth with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. Sylvie stirred her coffee like it owed her rent. "So," she said carefully, "my online account's been glitching. Weirdest thing. I couldn't even check the power bill this week." "That's strange," I replied, reaching for the menu. "Maybe it's time to upgrade your password." "Yeah," Raina added, glancing at her husband. "Mine got declined buying school supplies yesterday. I thought it was fraud or something." I looked up, meeting her gaze directly. That must have been frustrating. There was a silence that wasn't really silent. The kind that hovers above polite words, thick and expectant. They wanted to corner me, but not yet. Not while the waitress was still pouring water and asking if we wanted the cinnamon rolls to share. I waited until the waitress walked away before placing my phone gently on the table. No theatrics. Just a single swipe to unlock the screen. "Before we order," I said evenly, "I think we should all look at something together." They leaned in, out of habit. One tap. There it was, a screenshot of their group chat. Asterisk, "She's like a bank with a soul. Just smile, she'll pay. LOL. Asterisk, watch her give us more when we pretend mom's sick again." Forks froze midair. Even Kennedy's phone slipped quietly under the table. I glanced up. "You left it open on your iPad, Raina." "I wasn't snooping. I was paying your phone bill again." Her mouth parted in shock, then snapped shut. Then the tears came. Too fast. Too polished. That was a joke. It was out of context. "You don't know how stressful things have been. Greg got furloughed and the dental bills." My voice was quiet. Flat. You don't need to spin this. Sylvie cleared her throat, playing the elder card. We've all struggled, Arlena. You always had more and family helps family, right? I nodded slowly. I didn't mind helping, I said. I minded being lied to. It wasn't loud. No shouting, no slammed napkins. Just a shift in the air, like the moment before a storm, when the birds fall silent and even the trees seem to brace themselves. I reached into my purse and pulled out the folder. Mia tensed. Raina's hand hovered near her coffee. Sylvie looked away. I opened the folder and laid down the first paper, Raina's cosmetic surgery invoice, labeled and dated, paid in full. Then Mia's 3 months of back rent. Next, Sylvie's copay from that hospital visit she insisted was an emergency. One by one, they formed a quiet pile. $117,000. This isn't help, I said, almost whispering. This was a system. I just didn't know I was the only one who didn't realize it. Greg shifted uncomfortably. Hey, maybe this isn't the place. No, I said, turning toward him. It's exactly the place. Because this was never just about money. It was about trust. About being used. Raina looked ready to crumble. We needed it. I cut in gently. Then you should have asked. Not. Plotted. Sylvie blinked hard. So, what now, Arlena? You just cut us off. I took a slow sip of water. Let the pause stretch long enough to leave room for silence to sting. No. I just see clearly now. That's all. I pushed my chair back and stood up. Oh, and the house, I added, brushing crumbs off my lap. You'll need to be out by Thursday. I didn't look back. Not at the table. Not at Raina's frozen expression. Not even at my mother's slightly trembling hand clutching her fork. I walked straight out of that sunlit brunch spot and let the door swing shut behind me. Outside, the Illinois air carried a breeze, sharp enough to sting, but my skin didn't flinch. I got in my car, buckled up, and just sat for a moment with both hands resting on the wheel. Calm. Or something trying hard to resemble it. The keys to the house weighed differently in my purse now. No longer symbolic of shared space or guilt-soaked generosity. Now they felt precise. Decisive. Like tools. Or weapons. The drive home was familiar and quiet. Monday morning traffic hadn't thickened yet. I passed the corner store where Sylvie used to buy cheap birthday balloons. Drove past Raina's favorite salon, paid for more than once with emergency transfers from my account. And then I turned onto my own street, lined with the same sleepy maples that had stood guard for decades. But as I pulled into the driveway, the glow of the porch light sliced through something in me. It shouldn't have been on. I hadn't been home in 4 nights. And there it was, Raina's laundry basket, sitting halfway up the front steps, one pink hoodie drooping out like a flag of entitlement. A pair of gym shoes thrown beside it. Inside, through the slats of the blinds, I spotted Mia's reusable water bottle on my coffee table. My couch. My mug on the windowsill had lipstick. Not mine. It wasn't home anymore. It was a waiting room for people who never planned to leave. I didn't go inside. Instead, I drove to my lawyer's office in downtown Neepville. I'd called ahead before leaving the restaurant, asked for a short consult. No details, just I'm ready now. Mr. Keeley greeted me in the lobby with a folder already in hand, eyes kind but questioning. You're ready to initiate? Yes, I said, sitting down across from him, not bothering with small talk. I want to file for possession. 72-hour notice for unauthorized residence. He blinked. Family? Yes. A pause. Then a nod. Then I'll be delicate but direct in the language. I slid a copy of the deed across the table. Clean. Untouched. My name, Arena D. Westlake. Sat alone, bold and unshared at the top. No add-ons. No co-signers. Just me. I never added anyone, I said quietly. His eyes scanned the document, then looked up. They've been staying there for how long? Years. He didn't say anything judgmental. Just started typing. Papers printed. I signed. He witnessed. By the time I left his office, the sun had started to dip. The street lamps flickered in competition with the amber lights settling across the trees. I stopped by the locksmiths on my way back, handed them the specs, and set the appointment for 8:30 p.m. At precisely 8:28, two young men in navy polo shirts rang the bell and changed every lock on every exterior door without asking a single question. When they finished, I handed each of them a tip in cash and thanked them softly. The old keys I slipped into a brown paper envelope and set on the fireplace mantel. A quiet ending. Then I printed a short notice in 14-point font and taped it to the inside of the front door's glass pane. Asterisk resident status changed. Please retrieve personal belongings by Thursday at 8 p.m. Entry will not be granted after that. Asterisk within an hour, the calls started. Raina's number popped up first. Decline. Then Mia. Then Sylvie. Text messages buzzed in. Is this a joke, Irina? What are you doing? You can't be serious. Then came the voicemails. You're being cruel. You said you loved us. We're your family. I walked away from the phone, turned on the record player in the living room, and dropped the needle on an old Dinah Washington album. Her voice rose and swirled through the air, pushing back the desperate ringtones like fog receding from light. I sat in the armchair, let my hands rest, and then I stood. Walked slowly to the hall closet and pulled down a shoebox wrapped in faded paper. Tucked inside were old birthday cards, a train ticket from my first trip to Boston, and beneath them, a folded note, worn at the creases, in Geneva's handwriting. The ink just a little blurred from time and maybe a few tears. Asterisk there is dignity in boundaries. Love that costs your soul isn't love. Asterisk she'd left me this house. Everyone thought I'd bought it or that someone else had helped. But Geneva had done it quietly with one condition. Wait. Give them time. Let's see who they become. I had waited. Years. Through skipped payments and guilt trips. Through Raina's passive digs and Sylvie's tight-lipped silence whenever I asked for clarity. Through the whispers that I was too sensitive and overreacting anytime I questioned the open-ended nature of their stay. And finally, when I whispered back to that note, I've waited long enough, I meant it. I set the box back gently, closed the closet, and moved through the house like it was new again. I didn't cry. I hung new photos above the staircase. One of me on a solo trip to Berlin, a Polaroid of Aunt Geneva with her head thrown back in laughter, a framed program from my master's graduation. And on the mantel, a small ceramic bowl I'd made last year in grief therapy, crooked but solid. Each piece reclaimed space that had been silently borrowed by people who never asked permission. I moved Raina's things into bins, labeled them. Mia's makeup bag. Sylvie's old knit blanket. A single earring I knew belonged to Raina, left near the sink like an echo of ownership. Everything in boxes. Everything by the door. I poured a cup of chamomile tea, curled up on the couch, and finally, truly rested. Until I heard the sound of paper sliding against wood, just under the door. I walked over, bent down, and picked up the envelope with my name typed neatly in black ink. Just when I thought silence would follow, a subpoena slid under my door. I stared at the thin manila envelope on the floor for a moment before picking it up. It was angled just so, like someone had taken care to slide it under with a crease perfectly aligned against my doormat. The chill from the hallway seeped through the crack in the door, but it wasn't the cold that made me shiver. It was the precision. The paper inside crackled softly as I unfolded it. A subpoena filed by Raina. The accusations: unlawful eviction, financial exploitation, emotional distress. I let out a soft exhale, sharp at the end. My first instinct wasn't rage or even fear. It was a bitter kind of amusement. I walked to the kitchen, laid the document on the counter, and leaned on my elbows. So this was her next move. The wording danced in front of me as I scanned. She claimed I'd promised the house was shared. She cited a year-old string of text messages, ones that, taken out of context, might sound like I had invited her to stay indefinitely. She really wants to fight this in court, I murmured, shaking my head slowly. She's forgotten who taught her to read contracts in the first place. The next morning, I met with my attorney in a quiet office downtown. I arrived 10 minutes early, coffee in hand, and a burgundy leather folder under my arm. It was the same folder I'd once used for PTA budgets and family schedules, ironic given its new contents. Inside were the deed in my name, always had been. 10 years' worth of utility bills, mortgage payments, Maintenance receipts, every dollar mine. Screenshots of group texts, the ones where Reina and the others called me a cheap doormat, joked about draining me dry, and, chillingly, Reina had once typed, "She'll keep paying if we just fake love." Watch. My attorney, Mrs. Lang, a woman in her 60s with eyes sharper than broken glass, flipped through the folder in silence. Her finger hovered over the group chat printouts. She looked up at me. "They handed you your defense. And your dignity." I let that settle between us. No need for a smile. No victory lap. Just clarity. The pretrial mediation was scheduled for the next afternoon. It was held in a small, nondescript conference room inside the courthouse, beige walls, faux wood table, and a clock that ticked too loudly. Reina walked in with a tissue already in her hand, eyes misted but dry. She had that sheepish tilt to her head, like someone who'd just been caught sneaking candy, but wanted you to feel bad for her anyway. "I never wanted it to come to this," she said, voice cracking just enough to sound practiced. "We were a family. I didn't think you'd change." I said nothing. The mediator, a calm, middle-aged woman with a notepad and a tired expression, asked if I had anything to share before opening negotiations. I slid one photo across the table. Just one. A screenshot of Reina's message. *Arlene will keep paying if we just fake love. Watch. The mediator went silent. Reina's face flushed immediately. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. Just a faint gasp, like she'd lost her line in a play she'd written. "I'm not angry," I said quietly. "I'm done." She blinked, caught off guard. "This isn't revenge. It's relief." With that, I stood and left. No threats. No raised voices. Just my heels clicking across the tile floor, steady and final. By the time I made it across the street to a small cafe, the emotional heaviness was beginning to lift. I chose a corner table near the window, the kind of spot where you could disappear into the hum of downtown life. I ordered a plain coffee, black, no sugar, and watched the courthouse entrance across the street. I didn't check my phone at first. I just sat with the warmth of the mug between my palms, breathing in the quiet. It felt earned. But eventually, the screen lit up. 27 unread messages. Reina. Our mother. Even my brother, who hadn't said more than 10 words to me since last Christmas. Some pleaded. Some accused. One simply read, "Who are you now?" I didn't respond. Instead, I glanced at my reflection in the cafe window. The woman looking back at me didn't look bitter. She didn't look afraid. She looked free. I took another sip, the coffee grounding me. The outside world blurred behind the window glass, and for once, it didn't matter who was watching. I left the cafe as the sky began to darken, soft purples and bruised blues stretching above the city. I walked slowly, choosing side streets where the air was quieter, where the echoes of footsteps were my own. But when I finally pulled into the driveway and stepped onto the front porch, I froze. There, waiting for me right at the center of the welcome mat, was something I never expected to see again. I didn't even have to step onto the porch to know something was wrong. The smell hit me first. Sharp, acrid, and unmistakably burnt. I paused mid-step, keys still dangling between my fingers. There, propped against the front door like an offering from hell, was a half-melted cardboard box. Charred edges curled like petals. The top had collapsed in on itself, revealing glimpses of blackened paper, a scorched piece of metal, and something that used to be blue velvet. I dropped my purse inside the hallway and crouched slowly beside the box, the motion stiff from the cold and from what I already knew I'd find. The first thing I recognized was the edge of a picture frame, cracked glass fused into a warped plastic border. The photo inside had mostly disintegrated, but I could still make out part of my father's cheek and a sliver of my handwriting on the corner, First Science Fair. Under that, the spine of my childhood diary had curled inward like it was trying to protect itself. The pages were mostly ash. But it was the locket that gutted me. The chain, somehow intact, looped around a piece of burnt cardboard like a noose. I lifted it carefully, holding it up to the porch light. The tiny gold heart had melted just enough to be unrecognizable, unless you knew exactly what it had once looked like. It was the last thing Dad gave me before the cancer stole him. So you never feel alone, he'd whispered. Inside the box, wedged between the remains, was a yellow sticky note. Its edges singed, but one message still visible, asterisk jagged. Cruel. Still smiling doormat, asterisk. I stood up. Not shaking. Not crying. Just quiet. I walked back into the house, locked the door, placed the locket on my hallway table, and stared at it for a long time. Then I picked up my phone and drove straight to the precinct. It was almost midnight when I arrived. The station was hushed, the overhead lights buzzing faintly as an officer behind the desk looked up from her paperwork. "You here to file something?" she asked, glancing at my face. I nodded. "I'd like to report arson, property damage, and harassment." She slid a clipboard toward me. "You know who did it?" "I don't need to guess," I said evenly. "I need to document." As I handed over the completed form, another officer walked over, younger, with alert eyes. He asked if there were any cameras nearby. I paused. "My neighbor across the street has a smart doorbell. He travels a lot, but the camera always runs." The officer scribbled something and nodded. "We'll pull footage. Anything you'd like to add?" I hesitated, then opened my phone and tapped open a photo I'd snapped of the note. They wanted me to know it was personal. That's not random vandalism. That was meant for me. Back in the car, I sat still for a moment before turning the engine. The radio was silent. My reflection in the rearview mirror looked like someone I hadn't met before. I didn't drive home right away. Instead, I turned toward the old neighborhood where Mom and Dad had bought their first home, before the fights and the cold dinners and the favoritism carved our family into pieces. It was nearly 1 o'clock in the morning. Empty streets, a few porch lights glowing. I passed the park where Raina once stood up to a group of kids calling me teacher's pet. She'd balled her fists, spit back at them, and dragged me home by the wrist. For a moment, I let myself remember that Raina. The girl who made me laugh until juice came out of my nose. The sister who taught me how to braid hair and cried with me the day our dog died. But then my mind returned to that box. The locket. The note. And the realization hit me like a cold slap. Maybe the Raina I missed had never existed beyond that single afternoon. Maybe the version of family I'd mourned wasn't real. It was just a story I'd clung to. And like all good stories, it was time to end it. "You can't grieve what was fake," I whispered aloud. "But you can bury it." I returned home in the early hours, parked in my driveway, and sat in the car until the sky began to lighten. Inside, I made coffee. Strong. No sugar. Then I opened my laptop. I didn't start with a lawsuit. That would come. But right now, what I needed was a record. A truth that didn't need cross-examination. I created a new document. At the top, in bold, "Love isn't owed and family isn't free," I started writing. Not for pity. Not to tear anyone down. But to let the silence finally speak. Paragraph by paragraph, I laid it out. The small slights, the veiled jabs, the erasure of my contributions, the twisting of my words. I wrote about how loving someone doesn't mean losing yourself. How being family doesn't excuse cruelty. How the ones who are supposed to protect you can sometimes be the ones who slowly unmake you. I didn't mention names. I didn't need to. The story wasn't about vengeance. It was about freedom. I finished the draft just as the sun crept through the blinds, bathing the living room in a soft orange haze. I saved the document, attached it to an email, and scheduled it for publication with a quiet digital magazine that championed real voices, real pain, and real resilience. It would go live in a few hours. And I had no idea what storm it would bring. The next morning, I poured my coffee with one hand and clicked publish with the other. Then I sat back, half expecting silence. Maybe a few views. Maybe someone from my grief support group would read it and nod along. But within an hour, I saw the first wave hit. It started slow. A single share from a parenting blog. Then a reshare by someone in Minnesota. A comment from a woman named Tanya. "You put my life into words." Then 20 more comments. Then 200. By lunch, it was everywhere. The title, "Love Isn't Owed and Family Isn't Free," was now trending on 3 platforms. My inbox filled with messages from strangers, mothers, daughters, even grandmothers, sharing stories of being cut off, disrespected, disowned. Some shared screenshots of their own family group chats, ones that looked hauntingly like mine. I'd blurred the names in my screenshots, made sure never to directly identify anyone, but the language, the words they used, were unmistakable. Anyone in my circle could recognize them. Especially Reina and her fiancé. Around 2 p.m., my phone buzzed with a headline screenshot. Civic Futures suspends CTO over viral post fallout. I stared at it in disbelief. That was Reina's fiancé's company. His car had been caught in the surveillance footage from the night someone burned my belongings. It didn't take long for people to connect the dots. Public pressure did the rest. I didn't celebrate. I didn't gloat. I just breathed. Around 3:30, my phone rang. Mom blinked on the screen. I didn't pick up. The voicemail came through seconds later. Her voice was sharp, trembling. So you went ahead and aired our dirty laundry to the world? Is that what you needed, Arlena? More attention? You've always been dramatic, always making everything about you. You think you're the victim here? You're not. I didn't cry. I just saved the voicemail. I wasn't keeping it out of spite. I just wanted to remember what it sounded like when someone tried to shame me for telling the truth. I thought that would be the worst of it. But an hour later, something unexpected popped up. A text from Carter, my older brother. I never said it, but I'm sorry, I didn't agree with them. A pause. Then another. Dad would have backed you 100%. I stared at those words. Carter never got involved. Not when Mom and Reina ganged up on me. Not at the wedding. Not even when I moved out and no one visited. I didn't text back, but I didn't delete it either. That night, I curled up on the couch with my laptop. Notifications still buzzing every few seconds. I muted them and opened an email that had been sitting unread in my inbox for an hour. The subject line read, "Your essay, your voice. Let's talk." It was from a journalist at one of the largest women's columns in the country. She said she'd read my essay 3 times, said it made her cry, said her own sister had blocked her on Facebook last Thanksgiving and no one in her family even mentioned it. "We want to run a feature," she wrote. "Not just about your story, but what it means for so many women out there who feel trapped in toxic family dynamics." I read her message twice before I replied. "I'm open, but only if we leave names out of it. This isn't about destroying people. I don't want revenge. I want others to feel less alone." She wrote back within minutes. "That's exactly what we hoped you'd say." The article was set to run in a week, but the real firestorm was already spreading. By Friday, Reina and my mother were scrambling. They started posting vague things online. Reina shared a picture of a flower arrangement with a caption, "Some people crave chaos more than peace." Later that day, Mom commented under a thread discussing my piece. She edited the screenshots. They weren't even real, but people weren't buying it. Underneath that post, I saw names I hadn't heard in years. Janine, my old neighbor, commented, "I was at the wedding. I saw how y'all treated her. Don't gaslight people now. Then Mr. Hanley, my high school English teacher. I've known Arlena for over 20 years. She's not perfect, but she's honest. Don't even try. Then there were the silent ones. Family friends. Distant cousins. They didn't comment, but they liked every word defending me." Reina tried to save face. She had a new product launch that weekend, some organic skincare line she'd spent months hyping up. But by Saturday morning, 3 sponsors had pulled out. The posts promoting her launch were flooded with #ReinaDoormatNoMore hashtags and questions like, "Is this the same Reina from the essay?" She tried to delete them. Didn't work. I wasn't watching gleefully. In fact, I barely slept that night. There was a kind of ache that followed the whirlwind, a weight in my chest that didn't go away with the validation. I wasn't looking to destroy them. But maybe, finally, they couldn't destroy me either. Around 11:30 p.m., after brushing my teeth and plugging in my phone to charge, I noticed a notification I almost missed. A message request from Reina. Just 4 words, "You've won." For now, I stared at it for a long time, then turned off the screen and went to bed. I didn't sleep that night. Reina's message, those 4 smug words, stayed in my mind like a thorn under skin. "You've won." For now, asterisk, it wasn't defeat. It was a threat disguised as surrender. I stared at my ceiling in silence, the soft ticking of the wall clock the only sound marking time as my thoughts churned. I didn't reply. I wasn't going to dignify it. Around 9 a.m., just as I finally managed to sit down with a lukewarm mug of coffee, my phone rang. Unknown number. Chicago area code. I hesitated, thumb hovering over decline, but something, instinct, maybe, told me to answer. Miss Arena Whitlow, a calm male voice asked. Yes, this is she. My name is Daniel Haskins. I'm your late father's attorney. I believe it's time we talk. I blinked. Excuse me. He continued gently, there are documents you weren't told about. Your father left a codicil to his original will. It was never filed. I think you'll want to see it. I sat up straighter, heart starting to pound. Wait. I was told he didn't even have a will. That it all defaulted to my mother. That's what your family insisted, Mr. Haskins replied. But the truth is more complicated. And frankly, what happened may not have been legal. By noon, I was parked in front of a low-brick building off a quiet street in Oakbrook. I hadn't been inside a law office since the day Dad died, when I'd signed some paperwork I barely understood, papers they rushed me through while I was still in shock. Mr. Haskins looked to be in his late 60s, with silver-rimmed glasses and a worn wedding ring. He gestured for me to sit, then handed me a folder with a soft, almost apologetic look. I'm sorry you were kept in the dark, Miss Witt. Your father trusted me with this, and I should have done more to make sure you saw it sooner. I opened the folder. Inside, in Dad's handwriting, was a single page dated just 8 months before he passed. The ink had smudged slightly in the corner. If Arlena chooses to walk away from the family, it read, she inherits full ownership of the lakeside property and 35% of the remaining estate. She deserves freedom, and she deserves to be seen. My throat tightened. Why didn't anyone tell me? Mr. Haskins hesitated. Your mother objected to its filing. Claimed your father had changed his mind. But I have emails proving otherwise. She delayed the filing just long enough to push it past probate, and by then, she rewrote the narrative. I finished for him. He nodded once. I sank back in the leather chair, heart pounding for different reasons now. Dad had known. Somehow, he'd seen what I was too heartbroken to say. And he'd left me not just a gift, but a choice. There's more, Mr. Haskins added. We also dug into your trust fund. I looked up sharply. It was frozen when you were 24. Claimed reason: poor financial judgment. Your mother submitted documents about a missed rent payment and a bounced check. That was 1 month. I'd just moved to New York. He slid over another document. What she didn't say was that she diverted the entire fund into an account under Raina's name. Tuition, housing, even a semester abroad. The paper blurred before me. How is that even legal? It wasn't. And now that you've discovered it, you have every right to sue for full recovery and damages. I didn't speak. I couldn't. I just stared at the numbers. What should have been my safety net, my independence, my father's promise, turned into a lifestyle accessory for the sister who just last week called me a leech. After I left the office, I didn't drive home. I headed north. The further I drove, the quieter it got. By the time I pulled into the gravel drive that wrapped around Dad's old lakeside cabin, the trees had swallowed all the noise. It was the first time I'd been back since he died. The air smelled like pine and thyme. I unlocked the door. It groaned open. Dust covered every surface, but everything else was just as he'd left it. Dad's old mug on the counter. A fishing hat still hanging by the door. I walked slowly through each room, trailing my fingers over the worn wood, the places I used to curl up and read while he hummed some old song on the porch. In the back bedroom, his room, I opened the nightstand drawer. Inside, tucked between a stack of faded receipts and a pack of gum, was a small photo. It was me, maybe 16, curled up next to him on the dock, head on his shoulder. On the back, in his uneven scroll, it read, asterisk, you don't owe them. Fly, asterisk. I sat on the edge of the bed, that photo shaking in my hands, and for the first time in this entire mess, I cried. Not from grief. From clarity. He knew. He saw. Even back then. And through all the noise, the gaslighting, the erasure, He'd left me a message that pierced through it all. Outside, the sun dipped low over the water, casting a gold trail across the ripples. I stood there for a long time, breathing in the air that smelled like childhood and second chances. Then I reached for my phone. I scrolled to a name I hadn't called in years. Not Reina. Not Mom. Someone else. Someone who thought they'd never hear from me again. I took a deep breath. Wind brushed past my face like a nudge. And I dialed. The line rang twice before he picked up. Hello. His voice cracked slightly, uncertain. Hi, Dr. Kier. I'm ready. Do you still have those papers we talked about? I asked calmly, though my hand was trembling just a little. There was a long pause. Then a quiet sigh. Yes, Arlena. I have everything. I looked out across the lake one last time before turning back toward the car. The wind off the water had a bite to it, but something inside me felt warm. Settled. The next morning, I arrived early at Belmont Grill, the same restaurant where Reina and Mom once cornered me like an afterthought at a table meant for 12. This time, I reserved the same spot, private, by the window, white tablecloths, quiet music in the background. I wanted them to feel comfortable. Arrogant. One by one, they arrived. Reina in heels too high for daylight, chewing gum like she owned the air. Mom with her pearls and half a scowl already on her face. Uncle Troy dragging his patent leather grin behind him. Wow, Reina said, sliding into the chair across from me. Didn't expect you to foot the bill for once. Mom chuckled, then whispered, Don't start, Reina. I said nothing. I just smiled politely and reached for my water. Then came the soft knock. A man in a gray suit, badge clipped to his belt, entered the room. He handed each of them a sealed envelope without a word. Reina opened hers first. Her face drained color almost instantly. What the this is a joke, right? She hissed, flipping pages. Fraud? Misappropriation? You're accusing me. Mom was next, her lips pursed tighter and tighter as she read through hers. By the third page, she threw the packet down like it burned her hands. You spiteful little thing, she snapped at me. You've always been dramatic, but this, dragging your family through court. I folded my hands, keeping my voice level. No, I'm not dragging anyone. I'm just done being the rug you wipe your feet on. These aren't accusations. They're findings. You forged documents. Redirected funds. Blocked my trust. You knew exactly what you were doing. Reina stood up, pointing at me. This is about your ego, Arlena. You couldn't stand that Dad liked me better. That's the story you told yourself, I replied. But he saw through it. You should have read the real will. Silence followed. No forks clinked. No one moved. Even Uncle Troy stopped sipping his wine. I'm not here for revenge, I said, finally rising to my feet. I'm here for the truth. And the silence you all bought with my kindness? That contract's expired. As I walked out, I didn't glance back. Later that afternoon, on the courthouse steps, cameras flashed. Reina's lawyer shoved a microphone away. My mother shielded her face with a designer handbag. But the reporters kept coming. Ma'am, can you comment on the trust discrepancies? Do you deny redirecting Arlena's inheritance? Is it true the lake house wasn't listed in the family's final declaration? They didn't answer. They just looked like shadows of themselves, drawn, brittle, and exposed. I kept my pace steady as I passed the crowd. A young reporter jogged up beside me. Miss Arena, anything to say to your family today? I paused for a second, adjusting my scarf. Then I looked into the lens and said, I just hope they learn what love without conditions looks like. That night, I drove back to the lake house. The porch light flickered as I stepped inside, my bag over one shoulder, the warmth of the wood cabin welcoming in a way I didn't expect. I hadn't touched the old desk in the corner since I'd first found the photo, but tonight I had something to place on it, a brass plate etched with the Doormat Project. Below it, the mission, support for adult children recovering from family coercion and emotional neglect. The foundation was live. A small team of volunteers. A budget carved from the settlement. And plans to launch workshops, publish resources, and offer quiet space for people who grew up like me. People taught to shrink in exchange for peace. While filing some papers, I noticed a thick envelope tucked inside the back of the drawer. No stamp. just the name of my father's old law firm. I sat down, hands suddenly cold, and opened it. The letter was handwritten, his script slanted but strong. Asterisk if you're reading this, they've probably tried to rewrite your life by now. I'm sorry I couldn't stop it sooner. One day, they'll call you names ungrateful, cold, broken. But what you are, Arena, is free. Don't waste that. Asterisk my breath caught. Tears welled, but none fell. I just pressed the paper to my chest and closed my eyes for a moment. Outside, the trees rustled in the wind. I stepped onto the porch with a cup of coffee and sank into the old wicker chair Dad used to sit in. It creaked under me. Familiar. Solid. No one was calling. No one was asking for anything. And for once, I wasn't waiting for an apology. The silence around me wasn't the empty kind anymore. It was clean. Mine. And that day, I finally understood, silence is not surrender. Sometimes, it's a legacy.